The encounter. The February wind howled through Chicago's downtown as Eliza Reed hurried from the rehabilitation center where she worked as a physical therapist. Snow had begun falling in thick flakes, accumulating quickly on the sidewalks. She pulled her wool scarf tighter, grateful for the extra layer despite its fraying edges, a reminder of the student loans she was still paying off at 27. Ahead, an elderly woman struggled with a walker on the increasingly slippery sidewalk. While others hurried past, heads down against the biting cold, Eliza noticed the woman's precarious balance. Her instincts took over before conscious thought could intervene. "Ma'am, please let me help you," Eliza called, jogging carefully to reach her. "This snow's getting dangerous." The woman looked up with startled blue eyes that crinkled warmly at the corners. "Oh, thank you, dear. I'm afraid I misjudged the weather. My driver was supposed to meet me, but there seems to be some confusion." Eliza steadied the walker while offering her arm for additional support. "I'm Eliza. Let me get you somewhere warm while you sort things out." "Dorothy," the woman replied, her voice cultured but kind. "I appreciate your kindness more than you know." Together, they made their way to a small cafe Eliza frequented. The barista, Miguel, greeted her with a knowing smile as she helped Dorothy settle at a corner table. "Hot tea for your friend?" he asked, already reaching for Eliza's usual chamomile. "Yes, please. And maybe some of those almond cookies?" Dorothy protested mildly when Eliza paid, but Eliza waved away her concerns. "It's nothing, really. I believe in paying forward the kindnesses I've received." As they sipped their tea, Dorothy shared stories of her travels while Eliza spoke of her work helping patients recover movement and independence after injuries. Time passed easily between them, the storm outside temporarily forgotten. "You have healing hands and a good heart," Dorothy observed, watching Eliza demonstrate a gentle wrist exercise. "Not everyone would stop for an old woman in a storm." Eliza smiled, slightly embarrassed. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that isn't true," Dorothy replied softly. "Most people walk past without a second glance." When Dorothy's phone finally chimed with a message, her face brightened. "My son has sent someone for me. Would you help me to the door?" Outside, a sleek black car waited, its driver rushing forward with an umbrella. Eliza helped Dorothy into the vehicle, refusing the woman's attempt to press something into her hand. "No payment necessary," Eliza insisted. "Just take care on these icy sidewalks." Dorothy held her gaze for a moment. "Then perhaps we'll meet again, Eliza Reed." As the car pulled away, Eliza realized she'd never given Dorothy her last name. Shrugging it off as a slip of her own tongue, she turned back toward her apartment, unaware that her simple act of kindness had set extraordinary events in motion. Curious meetings. James Sullivan frowned at the security report on his tablet. At 34, he'd built Sullivan Technologies from a startup to a multi-billion-dollar company, developing an instinct for people trying to manipulate their way into his world. His mother's impromptu adventure during the snowstorm had triggered every protective alarm in his system. "You're overthinking this, James," Dorothy said from her armchair in his penthouse living room. Eliza was simply kind. "Not everyone has ulterior motives." "A coincidence that she works at the rehabilitation center our foundation just agreed to fund?" James raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe in coincidences, Mother." Dorothy sighed. "Perhaps it's divine timing rather than calculation. You should meet her without prejudice." James remained skeptical but agreed to his mother's request. He owed Dorothy everything. She'd raised him single-handedly after his father abandoned them, working multiple nursing jobs while encouraging his early tech innovations. Now that roles had reversed with her health declining, he found it impossible to deny her anything. The next morning found James at Cornerstone Coffee, the cafe his security team had identified from Dorothy's description. He positioned himself near the counter with his laptop, appearing absorbed in work while actually watching the door. When Eliza entered, her cheeks flushed from the cold, he immediately understood his mother's impression. There was something genuine about her, from her practical boots to the way she greeted the barista by name and asked about his classes. "The usual, Eliza?" Miguel asked. "Please. Double shot today. I have back-to-back patients until 6. As she waited, James intentionally bumped into her, causing her coffee to splash slightly. "I'm so sorry," he said, immediately offering napkins. "Let me replace that." Eliza looked up, momentarily startled by his height and the intensity of his gaze. "No harm done. The cup caught most of it." "I insist," James said, signaling to Miguel. "It's the least I can do." Something in his tone made Eliza study him more carefully. "Have we met before?" "I don't believe so." "James Sullivan." He extended his hand, watching for recognition of his name. There was none as she shook it firmly. "Eliza Reed. Thanks for the coffee, but I really need to run." Over the next 2 weeks, James engineered several accidental meetings at the coffee shop, near the rehabilitation center, and at a bookstore Eliza frequented. Each encounter revealed more about her dedication to patients, her habit of leaving generous tips despite her modest income, her preference for mystery novels. Most surprising was her complete disinterest in impressing him, even after she eventually recognized his name from a magazine cover. Unlike others who immediately shifted behavior upon learning his status, Eliza remained refreshingly unchanged. "You're still watching her like she's a puzzle to solve," Dorothy commented after James mentioned their fourth encounter. James smiled slightly. "Perhaps I am, but I'm beginning to think you're right about her motives." "And?" Dorothy prompted. "And I've asked her to dinner tomorrow." "As myself, not as a coincidental meeting?" Dorothy's eyes twinkled. "About time." Walls crumbling. The small Italian restaurant was a far cry from the upscale establishments where James typically entertained. Tucked away on a side street with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles, it felt intimate rather than impressive. He'd chosen it specifically after learning it was Eliza's favorite. "I was surprised you called," Eliza admitted, twirling pasta on her fork. "You seemed very busy with your company." James studied her across the table, appreciating how the candlelight softened her features. "I make time for things that matter." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "And dinner with a physical therapist matters?" "Dinner with you matters," he replied, surprising himself with his honesty. "You're different." A smile played at her lips. "Different good or different concerning?" "Definitely good. Refreshing, actually." As they shared tiramisu for dessert, James found himself speaking about his childhood, the lean years before success, his mother's sacrifices, the drive that made him sometimes forget the human element in business. Stories he rarely shared emerged naturally in Eliza's presence. "You speak about your mother with such love," Eliza observed. "She must be remarkable." "She is," James agreed, thinking how Dorothy would appreciate Eliza's insights. "Perhaps you'll meet her someday." That evening ended with a simple kiss on Eliza's cheek but marked a turning point. Over the following weeks, they created a rhythm. Dinner twice a week, Sunday morning walks along Lake Michigan, texts during busy days. One evening, after a charity event where James had been speaking, he invited her to his penthouse for the first time. Standing on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Eliza seemed unusually quiet. "What are you thinking?" he asked, moving to stand behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "That your world and mine are very different," she replied honestly. "I help people regain movement after injuries. You transform entire industries." James turned her to face him, and yet here we are, together. When he kissed her, the walls he'd built around himself began to crumble. Her response, tentative at first, then deepening, awakened something long dormant within him. Her fingers threaded through his hair as he drew her closer, the cityscape forgotten. Later, as they lay tangled in his sheets, her head resting on his chest, James realized with startling clarity that what had begun as investigation had transformed into something profound. Eliza had worked her way past his defenses, not through calculation, but through genuine warmth. "Stay," he whispered against her hair. She looked up, her expression open and unguarded. "Tonight?" "For breakfast." "For tomorrow." He paused. "For as long as you want." As she smiled and settled back against him, James felt an unfamiliar peace. For once, he wasn't analyzing outcomes or anticipating problems. He was simply present, holding someone who wanted James the man, not Sullivan the mogul. What he didn't know was how quickly this newfound contentment would be tested. The revelation, the Lakeside Children's Hospital gala glittered with Chicago's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the ballroom as waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. James adjusted his bow tie nervously, not because of the upcoming speech he would deliver as the evening's major donor, but because tonight Eliza would finally meet his mother officially. "You look beautiful," he whispered, taking in Eliza's midnight blue gown, a splurge he'd insisted on after seeing how her eyes lit up when she spotted it in a boutique window. "And you look worried," she replied with characteristic directness. "It's just a gala, James," he smiled tightly. "I want my mother to like you." "I'm sure she's lovely," Eliza reassured him, unaware of the history waiting to unfold. As they made their way through the crowd, James was stopped repeatedly by business associates and social connections. Eliza observed how differently people treated him, with deference, flattery, and calculated familiarity. It contrasted sharply with the genuine man she had come to love over the past months. "James, darling," a cultured voice cut through her thoughts. "And this must be Eliza." Eliza turned, the polite smile freezing on her face as she recognized the elegant older woman approaching them. Those familiar blue eyes, now twinkling with barely suppressed delight, belonged to Dorothy, her Dorothy from the snowstorm. "You," Eliza whispered, pieces falling rapidly into place. "Dorothy Sullivan," James's mother confirmed, taking Eliza's hands in hers. "Though we've already met, haven't we, dear?" James looked between them, confusion evident. "What do you mean?" "Your Eliza is my snowstorm angel," Dorothy explained. "The young woman I told you about." Understanding dawned across James's features, followed quickly by alarm as he registered Eliza's expression, hardening from surprise to hurt. "You knew," Eliza said quietly, stepping back from both Sullivans. "All this time you knew who I was." "Eliza, please let me explain," James began. "The coffee shop meetings weren't coincidence," she continued, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Our accidental encounters. You were investigating me," Dorothy intervened. "James was simply protecting you," Eliza finished. "I understand. What I don't understand is the charade afterward." She turned to James, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Was any of it real? Or was I just an amusing diversion? The charity case who helped your mother?" The ballroom suddenly felt suffocatingly small. Without waiting for his answer, Eliza turned and walked swiftly toward the exit, dignity intact despite the curious glances following her retreat. James moved to follow, but Dorothy caught his arm. "Give her space, son. She's had quite a shock." "I never told her because it stopped mattering," he said desperately. What began as curiosity became something else entirely. "Then make sure she knows that," Dorothy advised. "But not tonight. Some revelations need time to settle." Later that night, Eliza's phone buzzed repeatedly with James's calls and messages, all left unanswered as she sat in her apartment, replaying every moment of their relationship through this new lens of understanding. The beautiful parts remained beautiful, but now shadowed by doubt about their foundation. Morning brought clarity, if not comfort. Eliza sent one text, "I need time to think." Please respect that. What she couldn't have anticipated was how that time would be cut short by circumstances neither of them could control. Healing hearts. 3 weeks passed with no contact, the longest 3 weeks of James's life. He'd respected Eliza's request for space while throwing himself into work with renewed intensity. The Sullivan Technologies office lights burned late into the night, employees whispering about the CEO's darkened mood. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Dorothy had fallen, the night nurse explained. Possible fracture. They were en route to Chicago Memorial Hospital. Hours later, James sat beside his mother's hospital bed, watching her sleep after surgery to repair a broken hip. The prognosis was good, but recovery would be challenging for a woman of 71 with her history of osteoporosis. "Mr. Sullivan?" A familiar voice from the doorway made his heart stutter. Eliza stood there in her professional attire, clipboard in hand. Her expression was composed, but her knuckles were white where they gripped the board. "The hospital administrator asked me to personally oversee your mother's physical therapy," she explained. "I can request another therapist if you prefer." James stood slowly. "No, there's no one I'd trust more with her care." A fragile silence stretched between them before Dorothy stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Eliza?" she murmured drowsily. "Is that really you, dear?" Something in the older woman's vulnerable tone broke through Eliza's professional distance. She moved to the bedside, taking Dorothy's hand gently. "Yes, I'm here, and I'm going to help you get strong again." Over the following days, James watched Eliza work with his mother, her hands gentle but firm, her encouragement unwavering even when Dorothy grew frustrated with limitations. She was different with him, polite but distant, their conversations strictly about Dorothy's progress. One evening, as Eliza was preparing to leave after Dorothy had fallen asleep, James blocked her path. "I miss you," he said simply. "James, don't. I'm here as Dorothy's therapist. And I'm here as the man who fell in love with you." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Yes, I sought you out because of what you did for my mother. I needed to know if you were genuine. People have always wanted something from me. Money, connections, status. And I couldn't believe someone would help her expecting nothing in return." Eliza's professional mask slipped slightly. "So I was an investigation. At first," he admitted. "For about 5 minutes. Then you were just you. Extraordinary in ways that had nothing to do with my mother or my company. You challenged me, made me laugh, saw me, not Sullivan Technologies." He reached for her hand, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. "The beginning may have been orchestrated, but everything that matters was real." "Is real?" Eliza studied his face, the shadows under his eyes, the sincerity in his gaze. "I felt foolish, like I'd fallen for an elaborate test. No test. Just a man with trust issues meeting a woman worth trusting." He squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of losing exactly what I've lost anyway." From the hospital bed, Dorothy's voice startled them both. "For heaven's sake, Eliza, forgive my son. He's miserable without you, and his brooding is exhausting. Despite everything—" Eliza laughed, a sound that restored hope to James's heart. "Perhaps," she conceded, turning back to James, "we could start again. With complete honesty this time." "I'd like that," he said softly. 2 months later, as spring bloomed across Chicago, Dorothy walked unassisted into her garden party celebrating her full recovery. Watching from across the lawn, James slipped his arm around Eliza's waist. "She's stronger than before the fall," he observed. Eliza nodded. "She had proper motivation to heal." "As did I," James replied, turning to face her fully. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I've learned that the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the most beautiful journeys. Will you continue this one with me?" As Eliza's eyes filled with tears of joy, Dorothy watched from the garden, smiling at how a moment of kindness in a snowstorm had bloomed into love in the spring.